Hey everyone, Sebastian here, back again with another live stream. This time we're doing practice test 5. So I'm going to share my screen with it and we will get started. Okay, there it is. Let's see. And I just have to share this with some people. And we'll go from there. So practice test 5. I'm not going to be doing a time the way I did last time, just because I could do a time, but then I'm rushed in explaining it, and I feel like that's just less helpful. I know I can do timed. I'm sure you do too. So we will just be practicing what we can. Okay. So we'll be starting the actual test in just one moment as I do this here. Okay. I know the test is coming up. It's the last one for a lot of people, but I wouldn't stress about it. If you're here, you're studying hard, then that should be good for everyone. Okay. Okay. Sorry, just sending out the link for this. I gotta figure out how to do that more efficiently. Okay, so now let's get started. So we'll start with the verbal, and then we will start with the math, and we'll go here. According to a team of neuroscientists from the University of Zurich, ease of decision making may be linked to communication between two brain regions, the prefrontal cortex and parietal cortex. Individuals tend to be more decisive if the information flow between the regions is intensified, whereas they make choices more slowly when information flow is blank. Okay. So in this one, which choice completes the most logical and precise word or phrase? So as usual, they start off with a verbal. So which choice completes the text with the most logical, precise word or phrase? So what's the relationship here? We have reduced, evaluated, determined, or acquired. So individuals tend to be more decisive and information flow is intensified. Whereas, so the whereas is key here. It's setting up a contrast between the beginning and the second half. So whereas sets up a contrast, intensified. So we're contrasting between intensified and this blank here. So it's going to be reduced. And if you notice, I don't even have to focus on the first part of the blank. I can just move from there. Okay. Now let's try this one here. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Ecologist Ezequiel Escura and colleagues found that the inhabitants of Mexica Empire use natural landmarks to track time with a high degree of blank. By observing the sun's position in relation to various points on the mountains surrounding the basin of Mexico, the Mexica were able to precisely identify the dates when significant events such as the solstices occurred. Okay, so it says precisely identify. So they're able to do it with a high degree of, is it precariousness? Precariousness would be where they feel uncertain. Exactitude would be where they're very specific. Resilient is strength, and inconspicuousness is all about doing it like hidden. So the only one that makes sense here is exactitude. The C and D don't really depend on the rest of what's happening in the passage. And precariousness is sort of the opposite of what we're looking for. Okay. So let's try this one here. Okay. In editor Lisa Yazek's introduction to her anthology, The Future is Female, More Classic Science Fiction Stories. More classic science fiction stories. By women, Yazek identifies an increasing sense of blank feminist mode of writing in the 1970s, in contrast to many women authored science fiction stories of the 1920s, whose politics were less deliberately signaled. Okay, so on this one here, we have A, prudently, B, an overtly, C, a cordially, and D, inadvertently. So again, we have a connection going in this here between were less deliberately signaled. So this must be more deliberately signaled. So which of these would show something that's more deliberately signaled? It would be an overtly. Prudently is just being carefully, cordially is being polite, and inadvertently is doing it accidentally. Okay, so now we can try this one here. Okay. Katie Lecca and colleagues found that the sun's corona provides an advance indication of solar flares, intense eruptions of electromagnetic radiation that emanate from active regions in the sun's photosphere and can interfere with telecommunications on Earth. Preceding a flare, the corona temporarily exhibits increased brightness above the region where a flare is. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Antecedent, impending, innocuous, or perpetual? So, is it coming before? Is it about to happen? Is it benign or is it always happening? So, can interfere with the telecommunication preceding a flare. So, it's happening right before there. That corona temporarily exhibits increased brightness above the region where the flare is about to happen, and that would be impending. Okay. Now, this one here, the following text is adapted from John Webster's 1912 novel, Daddy Longlegs. The narrator is a young college student writing letters detailing her weekly experiences. The college is organizing the freshman basketball team, and there's just a chance that I shall make it. I'm little, of course, but terribly quick and wiry and tough. While the others are hopping about in the air, I can dodge under their feet and grab the ball. Which choice best states the main purpose of the passage? A. So on these, I like to read all the answer choices. A, to compare basketball with other sports. B, to provide details about how to play basketball. C, to state how players will be chosen for the basketball team. Or D, to explain why the narrator thinks she might make the basketball team. So she's talking about the chance of her making it. There's a chance I shall make it. I'm little, of course, so that'd be against her, but terribly quick and wiry and tough. I can dodge on the field and grab the ball. So that's showing her strengths as a basketball player. So it's specifically about her. And that explains why the narrator thinks she might make the basketball team. D. Okay. And now this one here is going to be another main purpose of the text. Right. So this was main purpose as well. Researchers have long hypothesized that woolly mammoths were hunted to extinction in North America by humans using spears with grooved tips, known as Clovis points. One anthropologist set out to test this hypothesis. Using a mechanical spear thrower, he launched spears with Clovis points into mounds of clay, substitutes for the animals large bodies. The projectiles generally penetrated in only a few inches into the clay, an amount insufficient to have harmed most woolly mammoths. This led the anthropologist to conclude that hunters using spears with lowest points likely weren't the principal drivers of extinction. Okay. Which choice best states the main purpose of the text? To argue for the significance of new findings and ongoing debates among researchers, to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the methods used in an experiment, to summarize two competing hypotheses and a major finding associated with each one, to describe an experiment whose results cast doubt on an established hypothesis. So for this one, which choice best states the main purpose? Okay, so let's look back at the passage. Researchers have long hypothesized that woolly mammoths were hunted to extinction. Okay. One anthropologist set out to test this hypothesis. Okay, so we're talking about a hypothesis by that person. And then using a mechanical spear thrower, the launched spears. Okay, so they're describing it, the experiment. The projectile is generally penetrated. This led the anthropologist to conclude. So if we break it down sentence by sentence, you see after the first sentence, it's all about the experiment. And is it casting doubts on a hypothesis? By proving this led them to conclude that hunters using spears likely weren't the principal drivers of the experiment of the extinction. So that does cast doubt on the hypothesis. So D makes sense. There's not two competing hypotheses. That's not about advantages or disadvantages, and it's not about significance for the new finding. So even if you felt unsure about D, A through C are so clearly off base that you would still choose D. Okay, according to the text, what do some historians suggest about Maya civilization? The ancient writing system used in the Maya kingdoms of southern Mexico and Central America had a symbol for the number 0. The earliest known example of the symbol dates to more than 2,000 years ago. At that time, almost none of the writing systems elsewhere in the world possessed a 0 symbol. And the use of 0 in Mexico and Central America may be even more ancient. Some historians suggest that Maya mathematicians inherited it from Olmec civilization, which flourished in the region 2,400 to 3,600 years ago. According to the text, what do some historians suggest about Maya civilization? So here it says some historians suggest that Maya mathematicians inherited it from the Olmec civilization. So Maya civilization acquired the use of 0 from the Olmec civilization. So yeah, A, that's right there. Many civilizations respected its historians more. No. Maya civilizations were highly secretive about its intellectual achievements. No. And D, Maya civilization tried to introduce its writing system to other civilizations. No. So unlike the other ones that were about the overall passage, here there's a specific moment when they mention some historians, and that's what we want to focus on. Okay, which states the main idea of the text. So this is more like the main purpose again. A subject of much speculation, distinctive sets of parallel ridges mark the icy crust of Europa, Jupiter's smallest moon. Researchers now claim that the ridge's formation mechanism mirrors that of a strikingly similar pair of Greenland's ice sheet. There, surface water seeped through fissures in the sheet and formed a water pocket that subsequently disrupted the overlying ice, forcing fragments of it upward and outward into peaks as the pocket froze and expanded. Although Europa lacks liquid surface water, the same process could be driven by the moon's subsurface ocean. Okay, so for this one, what's happening? Which choice best states the main idea? So again, you want to read all the answer choices. A, researchers think that the ridges on Europa and the ridges in Greenland may have been formed by the same process, even though Europa, unlike Greenland, doesn't have liquid on its surface. B, the primary difference between the ridges on Europa and the ridges on Greenland is that unlike the Europa ridges, the Greenland ridges are parallel. C. C. The pair of ridges found on Greenland's ice sheet appear to have formed long before the recently discovered sets of ridges on Europa formed. D. Researchers don't understand why Europa is marked by so many sets of ridges when the moon doesn't have any liquid water on its surface that could have collected and expanded under the icy crust. Okay, so how does this one work? Is okay. Although Europa lacks liquid surface water, the same process could be driven by researchers think that the ridges on Europa and the ridges in Greenland may have been formed by the same process through it. That of a strikingly similar pair on Greenland's ice sheet. So they have similarities there. Their subsurface saltwater seeped through fissures and formed a water pocket. All Europa lacks. The same process could be driven by the moon's subsurface ocean. So again, we're talking about the same process. Doesn't have liquid water. So A makes sense. The primary difference, they're not talking about the primary difference, they're talking about the similarities. The pair appear to have been formed long. No, again, that's sort of separating them. And they don't understand. No, that's not what they're saying. So it's A. Okay. So now let's go on to this one here. And on this one, let's see. To understand how Paleolithic artists navigated dark caves, archaeologist M. Angelus Medina Alcaide and her team tested different lighting methods in a cave in Spain using replicas of artifacts found in European art caves with art. They used three different Paleolithic light sources: torches, animal fat lamps, and fireplaces, determining that each likely had a specific purpose. For instance, the team learned that the animal fat lamps were less useful than torches while walking because the lamps didn't illuminate the cave floor. What choice states the main idea of the passage? A. Medina Alcaide and her team studied, demonstrated that fireplaces were essential to the creators of Paleolithic cave art. Medina Alcaide and her team discovered the Paleolithic cave artists in Spain used animal fat lamps more than they used torches. C. Medina Alcaide and her team were reluctant to draw many conclusions from their study because of the difficulty they had replicating light sources based on known artifacts. And D. Medina Alcaide and her team tested Paleolithic light sources and learned some details about how Paleolithic artists traveled within dark caves. Okay, so D makes sense. What is up with the other ones? So it's not focused on fireplaces being essential, so I'd eliminate that. It's also not focused on them using one more than the other. It doesn't tell us that. And then it's not focused on them being reluctant to draw conclusions because they did draw a conclusion at the end. So D is the most gentle sort of answer. That's often the right one here. Her team tested light sources and learned some details. And then the details we get are about the cave floor. Okay, great. And now let's look at this one here. A student is researching the trends and the topics submitted to a national science fair for high school students. The graph shows the number of submissions by topic that were made each year. Based on the data in the graph, the student claims that there were more medicine and health research topics submitted in 2019 than in any other year. Which choice most effectively uses data from the graph? So this is a command of evidence question, which we can tell just based off of the graph existing. So A, in 2016, the number of cellular and molecular biology topic submissions was the same as the number of animal science topic submissions. B, in 2019, there were more physics and space science topic submissions than there were medicine and health topic submissions. I don't know about that. C, the lowest number of animal science topic submissions in the year was approximately 95 in 2016. And D, the highest number of medicine and health topic submissions during the period shown is approximately 285 in 2019. Okay, so what's the underlined claim? Well, they already underlined it for us, so I don't have to do that, but it's right here. There were more medicine and health research topics submitted in 2019 than in any other year. So medicine and health research, that's the circle one, and that's the highest then. So that would be D, because that's the one focused on medicine and health topic submissions, and it gets the number correct about it being 285 there. Good. The other ones are not, this is physics and space science. We don't care about that. Animal science, no, and we don't care about cellular and molecular biology. Good. All right. Let's see this one. Looking back on girlhood in 1892 short story is an 1892 short story by Sarah Orne. In the story, the narrator explains that she prefers her hometown to other places she has visited. Which quotation from Looking Back on Girlhood most effectively illustrates this claim? A, there is always something fresh, something to be traced or discovered, something particularly to be remembered. B, two large rivers join just below the village at the head of the tidewater, and these, without great inflow from the sea, make a magnificent stream bordered by lovely green fields that slope gently to long lines of willows at the water's edge. C, I have a good deal of journeying in my life and taking great delight in it, but I have never taken greater delight than in my rides and drives and tramps and voyages within the borders of my native town. D, there is never ending pleasure in making oneself familiar with such a region. So the claim, right? She prefers her hometowns to any other place she's visited. So D doesn't really compare them, so that's out. A, there's always something fresh, something to be traced, something particularly to be remembered. That doesn't even really specifically talk about her hometown. But C, I have a good deal of journeying in my life and taking great delight in it, but I have never taken greater delight than my rides and drives and tramps and voyages within the borders of my native town. That's saying she's had a good time traveling, but nowhere is as good as her native town. So that one makes sense. D, two large rivers join just below the village at the head of the tide water, and these, with a great inflow from the sea, make a magnificent stream bordered by lovely green fields. That's just describing it. It doesn't say it's her favorite, so it has to be C. Okay, good. We're making pretty good time so far. Which choice from a survey given to shoppers who made a purchase at a retail store best supports the researcher's explanation? External shop. So we want to find the researcher's explanation. External shopping queues are a type of marketing that uses obvious messaging. A display featuring a new product, for example, or a buy one, get one free offer to entice consumers to make spontaneous purchases. In a study, data scientist Sam K. Hui and colleagues found that this effect can be also achieved with a less obvious cue. Rearranging sorry about that. Rearranging a store's layout, the researchers explain that trying to find items in new locations causes shoppers to move through more of the store, exposing them to more products and increasing the likelihood they'll buy an item they hadn't planned on purchasing. Which response from a survey given? Given to shoppers who made a purchase at a retail store best supports the researcher's explanation. A, I needed to buy some cleaning supplies, but they weren't in their regular place while I was looking for them. I saw this interesting notebook and decided to buy it too. B, I didn't buy everything on my shopping list today. I couldn't find a couple of items in the store, even though I looked all over for them. C, so their explanation, right, is exposing them to more products and increasing the likelihood they'll buy an item. That's caused by rearranging. So then the store sent me a couple for a new brand of soup. So I came here to find out what kind of soups that brand offers. I decided to buy a few cans because I had the coupon. The store is larger than the one that's close to where I live and it carries more products. I come here to buy some things that the other store doesn't always have. No. So the only one's talking about rearranging things is going to be A. So it should be A because A and B are talking about it, but B is saying you couldn't find it, so you didn't buy it, and that's not their main point. Their main point is you couldn't find it, so you're looking around, and while looking around, you buy new things. Okay, let's try the next one here. Even with the widespread adoption of personal computers, many authors still choose to write and revise their novels by hand and only then subscribe the final version on a computer. It may be tempting to speculate about how a novel written this way would be affected if it had been exclusively typed instead, but each novel is a unique entity, resulting from a specific set of circumstances. Therefore, blank, which choice most logically completes the text? A. In order to increase their efficiency, authors who currently write their novels largely by hand should instead work only on a computer. B. Authors who do most of their drafting and revising by hand likely have more success than those who work entirely on a computer. C. Novels written by hand take less time to produce on average than novels written on a computer do. And D, there is no way to reasonably evaluate how a work would be different if it had been written by other means. So in this one, even the widespread adoption, many authors still choose to write and revise. It may be tempting to speculate how a novel can be written this way would be affected, but each novel is uniquely okay. So this is saying we could speculate, but each novel is unique in their circumstances. So that's telling us we can't really draw a main conclusion. And that is going to be D. There is no way to reasonably evaluate how a work would be different. Good. Now, this one here, behavioral ecologist Will Wiggins, Sarah Bounds, and Sean Wilder recently examined the behavior of field collected and laboratory reared bold jumping spiders. They found a positive association between experimental high protein diets and aggressive behavior in field collected males, and a similar association between experimental high lipid diets and aggressive behavior in lab reared males. Additionally, field collected spiders showed a preference for flowers manipulated to display ultraviolet fluorescence, whereas lab reared spiders showed a preference for flowers dyed with red food coloring that was not fluorescent. Wiggins, Bound, and Wilder therefore concluded, which was most logical and completes the text. So lab-reared males additionally field collected spiders showed a preference for flowers dyed with red food coloring that was not fluorescent. Okay. Which choice most logically completes the text? Let's see this here. So for it to complete the text logically, we want Wiggins, Bounds, and Wilder therefore concluded that. What would it be? So what would their conclusion be drawing from? It would be from the data we just received, right? Which is that they found a positive association between high protein diets and aggressive behavior, and a similar association between experimental high lipid diets and aggressive behavior. Additionally, field collected spiders showed a preference for flowers manipulated to display ultraviolet fluorescence, whereas lab-reared spiders showed a preference for flowers dyed with red food coloring. So the way they're reared seems to make them respond differently to stimuli, and that would go with A. So it's not about aggression being reduced in the laboratory setting. We don't get info on that. Or experiments involving should make use of lab-reared individuals. That's not really what it would go here. I mean, that's probably true, but that's not what we care about. It would be also not C. So it would be A. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Now we're on to grammar. In forecasting weather events, meteorologists sometimes discuss the role of atmospheric rivers. What are atmospheric rivers and how blank? Part of the water cycle, atmospheric rivers are narrow channels of moisture moving through the atmosphere. In certain conditions, these rivers can release some of their moisture as precipitation, which just completes the text. So, what are atmospheric rivers and how? That's setting up a question. So, it'd be a question mark. So, it wouldn't be do they affect our weather without it? They do affect our weather. We need a question mark. So, it's C or D. How do they affect our weather, right? That's how we say it. We don't say how they do affect our weather. So, it'd be that one. Then we have this, the soundtrack to Mira New Year's 1991 film. Mississippi Masala expressively captures the clashing of cultures that happens when blank. A young Indian woman from Uganda and a young African American man from Mississippi meet. Featured throughout the film are songs from Uganda's Afrigo Band, the Indian composer L. Subramaniam, and the Mississippi blues musician Sam Chapman, which was completes it. So we have its protagonists. So these are all showing it's about possession. So it's so is it a possession for it, or is it just it is? When it is two protagonists? No, it is when it's two protagonists. And now do the protagonists own anything? No. So protagonist should not have an apostrophe. And also it should not have an apostrophe because pronouns do not take apostrophes when they're possessive. So it should be D. And now we have this one here, Julia Alvarez's 1994 novel, In the Time of the Butterflies, a fictionalized account of the lives of the Mirabal sisters, can serve as a starting point for those wanting to explore how the rule of dictator Rafael Trujillo has been represented in Dominican American literature. So if you notice here, we have a comma here, and this part's like a parenthetical phrase. So we want a comma at the end, and we don't want an and. So it's just, this is the setup. So we're going to do sisters, comma, no and. It's going to be C. Which choice completes the text so it conforms to the conventions of standard English? On March 23rd, 2021, a gust of wind wreaked havoc on global trade. Ever Given, an international shipping container vessel, became lodged in Egypt's Suez Canal, a major shipping route between Europe and Asia. The vessel took 6 days to blank. It's as heavy as 2,000 blue whales when fully loaded. Okay. So here, this part is explaining the last part. The vessel took 6 days to dislodge. That's an independent phrase. And then it's as heavy as 2,000 blue whales. That's also an independent phrase. So then together with those both independent phrases, we can't separate them just with a comma. We have to separate them with a comma and a fanboys, a period, a semicolon, or a colon. So this one has the colon we need, in part due to its sheer size. And the colon makes sense because the second part's explaining the first part. All right, now let's try 19. Another grammar question, woven from recycled yarn and hand tufted using a carpet weaving technique passed down by the artist's Turkish grandmother. So blank, so lush and tactically inviting that you are tempted. Okay. So this whole beginning is an introductory phrase. So what's this blank doing here, right? So what goes with that blank? It is going to be the topological tapestries of Argentine textile artists. No. The Argentine textile artist. So what is woven from the recycled yarn? That is that is the topological tapestries because the Argentine textile artist, that she's not woven from it, she's weaving it. Wen is also not woven from it, and Alexander Cayuga is also not woven from it. It is A. Okay. Jamaican British artist Willard Wigan is known for his remarkable blanks, so small that they are best viewed through a microscope. Wigan's sculptures are made from tiny natural materials such as spiderweb strands. Which choice completes its conventions of standard English? Is known for his remarkable microsculpture. So creation so small that they are best viewed through a microscope. That's not an independent clause, so we don't want a period. Or actually, no, we do want a period because that they are best viewed through a microscope is an independent clause. And the first part is known for his remarkable microsculptures is also an independent clause. So it has to be C. And then we have this one here. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? After appropriate permissions are granted, a typical archaeological dig begins with the surveyor making a detailed grid of the excavation site. Then the site is carefully dug, and any artifacts found are recorded and mapped onto the site grid. Blank, the artifacts are removed, cataloged, and analyzed in a laboratory. So this is about transitions. So you want to see the relationship between before the blank and after the blank. So on this one here, the artifacts are, okay. After appropriate permissions are granted, a typical begins with this, then the site does this. So it's setting up a sequential thing in time. So we want time with an ending. So it's not earlier, should be finally. On the contrary, it doesn't fit because that's a contrast. For instance, it'd be giving an example. That's also doing that. It is finally. And then we have this. In 1949, Frank Zamboni developed an ice rink's resurfacing machine. As Zamboni's machine moved along the rink surface, it first scraped off the top layer of ice. Next, it sprayed water. Okay, so this is similar to the last one, except now we have a blank here. So it's did this, first did this, then did this, then this, that. So again, we want time, not for example, not similarly, not in contrast, is next for 22. Again, transition in the 1880s, inventor Louis Latimer improved upon Thomas Edison's design for the electric light bulb. Latimer made the light bulb more durable by placing cardboard around its carbon filament. With this innovation, Latimer became the first Black inventor to contribute to the electrification of the world. So what's happening here before the blank? At first, we're given info on him. And then we're given more specific details, right? So he improved upon the design and then he made it more durable. That's how he improved upon it. So we're going into a more specific detail. So we're zeroing in. However, would be contrast. There's no contrast. Same with regardless. And soon would be time. So it's specifically for this one, D. And then we have this one, Jeffrey Gibson sculptural object. Know Your Magic Baby, an Everlast brand exercise bag embroidered with multicolored beads. And a fringe associated with the dances of Ojibwe people, stitches together literally and figuratively recognizable symbols from both native and non-native cultures. Gibson's piece also blurs the distinction between contemporary art and traditional crafts, which choice completes the text with the most logical transition. Okay. So we conversely would be a contrast. In so doing would be explaining what the first part's accomplishing. For instance, would be when we go into an example for it. And then in particular is when we go into something else. Hello, nice to see someone's joined the chat, Adam. Nice to see you. So we're just working on this. We'll do the next section, and then we'll do math, just to let you know. We're doing the whole practice test 5. All right, I'll focus now. So on this one here, 24, we have what is happening here, non-native culture. So by doing this, right, by stitching it together, symbols from both non-native and non-native culture, he's blurring the distinction between the two. So it'd be in so doing. Okay. I'm glad to see people are joining the chat. Yeah, talk amongst yourselves, ask me questions. All right, and now we have this one. Now we're on to the notes ones, right? Rhetorical synthesis questions, which are actually not too bad. There was a time when I would tell you you could solve these without even looking at the notes. They're making them more difficult now, so it's good to look at the notes. So I look at the question, then I'm going to look at the notes, then I'm going to do the answer choices. The student wants to emphasize a similarity between the Choctaw Code Talkers and the Navajo Code Talkers. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this? While researching the topic, okay, so we want to see similarity between the two code talkers. In World War I, U.S. soldiers who were members of the Choctaw Nation participated in the Choctaw Code Talkers program. They were trained to relay code military information in their native language. In World War II, they recruited Navajo soldiers to transmit code. These soldiers were known as Navajo code talkers. So in one, they were both used in wars. So that could be the thing. U.S. soldiers who were members used their native language. No, that has nothing to do with it here. In World War II, one group was known as the Navajo code talkers. No, both the Choctaw code talkers and the Navajo code talkers transmitted coded military messages in the soldiers' native language. Yes, and then D is showing a contrast. So it should be C. And then I see someone asked a question in here. Golden Hawk, test 5. You got a 1470. Are you good for 1450 on the real thing? I would say if you're getting 1470, I wouldn't say a 1450 is guaranteed, but you should be feeling good about getting 1450. Like that's definitely, I would say a 1470, you're probably ranging between getting a 1400 on the real thing and getting a 1500 on the real thing, depending on how good you're feeling and how primed. But yeah, definitely 1450 is in range for you. I would expect that. If you let me know what you got on other practice tests, I could give you a better estimation. Because 1470, if that's your highest ever, maybe that wouldn't be as good of a chance. But if that's sort of in line with everything, then definitely. While you answer that, I'll keep working on this. Student wants to explain an advantage of the ICAA's archive being digital. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? Okay, what's an advantage? So let's look at the notes to find an advantage. The International is directed by Mari Ramirez, oversaw an initiative to create an online archive of historical documents. The ICA digitized, including the writings. The creation didn't require historical documents to be removed from their countries of origins. Scholars now have more access to these documents. So that seems to be the advantage. They have more access to these documents. Okay, so, oh, and I see Golden Hawk, said 1510 was the maximum. Yeah, I would say if you got 1470 on one and 1510 on another, 1450 should be, you should be feeling good that you can get that on the test. Obviously, no guarantees, but I would bet you'll get a 1450 at least. The student wants to explain an advantage. So the advantage, right, is that it's now available to have access to more documents. So A, over 10,000 documents are part of the ICAA archive. By offering online versions of historical documents, the ICAA's archive provides more access without removing them. That seems to be the advantage. So I'll leave that one. I'm not going to eliminate that one for now. Among the historical documents are the writings? No, that's just giving us details about that. That's not giving us an advantage. The ICAA's director, Mari Carmen Ramirez, oversaw the creation. No, so it's going to be B, by offering online versions of historical documents. The ICAA's archive provides more access to these materials without removing them from their countries of origin. And that would make sense, right? That would be exactly what's going on in the passage by making it more available. Good. And then, yeah, I mean, I get that. Vocab feels hard. There's so many words to know and reading, but you have to understand that a lot of vocab isn't about knowing hard words. It's about decoding the sentences. So after I finish this one, we'll go into section 2, which starts with vocab, and hopefully that'll help you feel better about it. Student wants to use a quotation to support the claim about Tharp's contribution to rock and roll. So I'm going to look for quotations in the notes. Sister Rosetta Tharp was a gospel musician. She was known for her passionate vocals and electric guitar performances, was inducted. Roxy Morissette would sing until you cried, and then she would sing until you danced. Tharp is the unquestioned founding mother of rock and roll. So it has to be one of those two quotes. Okay, and it's specifically asking about rock and roll, so it should be probably the last quote there, the second quote. So it's going to be gospel musician had a major role. A doesn't have a quote. B doesn't have a quote. D has the quote about singing until you cried and also you danced until you quote. Nope. So it should be C. Sister Rosetta Tharp had such a major impact on rock and roll that Celeste Henderson called her the unquestioning founding mother of the genre. C. Okay, I'm done with that. Again, I'm not doing it timed regular because I'm talking to you guys and explaining things and reading things aloud, so I'm slower, and I just don't want to rush that exactly. So now we'll go on to section 2 and do some vocab. Okay, so with vocab, I read the passage, I read the words, and then I try to figure out the connection going on in the passage. Mary Engel Pennington, a chemist who helped advance home refrigeration, undoubtedly made a substantial impact on society. But her place in our historical memory is perhaps more blank than that of Stephanie Kwolek, who invented the incredibly strong material known as Kevlar, an accomplishment for which she will be long remembered. So it's interesting here that Stephanie will be long remembered. And then, but her places in our historical memories perhaps more. So there's a difference between how they're remembered. So could it be more permanent? Not if Stephanie is being long remembered. That doesn't really fit. Tentative could be it. That's sort of fitting like the sense of like unsure, whereas Stephanie is sure. Warranted, they're not really saying that she deserves it more. So it's not that. And prominent, no, that's sort of the opposite. So it has to be tentative. So you see here, the words themselves aren't that difficult. It's about connecting the parts of the sentences to each other and seeing which part connects to it. There's usually a part that goes with it, and you have to think, are they going along with each other or are they in contrast? So here there's a contrast because hers is more tentative. The more sets up that there's a contrast, and then we see the other one is very assured. So hers is tentative. And then we have this here to demonstrate the integrity of underground metal pipes. To demonstrate that the integrity of underground metal pipes can be assessed without unearthing the pipes, engineer Aroba Salim and colleagues blank the tendency of some metals' internal magnetic fields to alter under stress. The team showed that such alterations can be measured from a distance and can reveal concentrations of stress in the pipes. So they're doing something, they're using this to do that. If you're using, it's not hypothesizing, it's not discounting, and it's not redefining, they're exploiting that property. Okay, and now we have this one here. Wait, let me just go back, yeah. Despite the generalizations about human behavior that have produced many studies of behavioral psychology have used highly unrepresentative subject pools. Students at the colleges and universities where the researchers are employed. To blank the situation, it is necessary to actively recruit subjects from diverse backgrounds and locations. So this is an issue, right? They're creating unrepresentative subject pools. That's an issue. So you have to fix that. So which of these words fixes it? To sanction is to allow it. That doesn't make sense. To ameliorate is to improve or fix. So that would work. To rationalize, you don't want to rationalize, you want to fix it. And then to postulate is to make a statement about. So it's going to be B. You got to always read the answer choices and try to make a word for yourself first and then fill it in. But I wouldn't spend too much time trying to make your own word. Just do that quickly. Okay. Though not closely related, the hedgehog, Tenrex of Madagascar share basic blank true hedgehogs, including protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. Traits the two groups of mammals independently developed in response to equivalent roles in their respective habits. Which choice completes the text with the most logical, precise word or phrase? So share basic. So they're not closely related, but the though sets up that there's a contrast. So what's something that you would not expect of things that are not closely related? You wouldn't expect similarities. And then they tell us these two things, including protective spines, pointing out, or three things: protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. So that is going to be similarities with each other. So it's going to be D. All right, now which choice completes the text? Another vocabulary question. While recent scholarship has undermined claims that the works of 12th century Islamic philosopher Ibn Rushd were blank, other Muslim philosophers of his time, it is indisputable that his location in the Muslim ruled area of what is now Spain meant that his works were primarily available thousands of miles west of the center of Islamic thought. Okay, so this one is tricky. So he lives far from Islamic thought, as undermined claims that the work, so while it is indisputable. So this part is going against it. So while this is true, it is indisputable that he was also far away. So while it is controversial among, antagonistic toward, imitated by, or inconsequential to, this one would be inconsequential to. Now let's lay it out, right? So here, let's do things that don't contrast. Okay, so while recent scholarship has undermined claims, so this is undermining some claim about it, but this is going against that, and this going against it is saying that he was far from the thought. So then this original thing must have been going with that, and that would be that he was inconsequential because he's far from the thought there. Okay, this is like a double pivot. It's a weird, we're getting in the middle of the pivot, so that part goes with the last part. The following text is adapted from Herman Melville's 1855 novel Israel Potter. Israel is a young man wandering through New England during the late 18th century. Okay. I haven't read this book, but I read Moby Dick and I loved Moby Dick. It's one of the great novels I would recommend. Which choice best describes the function of the underlying portion of the text as a whole? Okay, so we have he hired himself out for 3 months. At the end of that time, to receive for his wages 200 acres of land lying in New Hampshire. His employer, proving false to the contract in the matter of the land, and there being no law in the country to force him to fulfill it, Israel, who, however brave-hearted, and even much of a daredevil upon a pinch, seems nevertheless to have evinced, throughout many parts of his career, a singular patience and mildness, was obliged to look around for other means of livelihood than clearing out a farm for himself in the wilderness. So, what is the purpose or function of the underlying portion? The underlying portion is describing Israel. Okay. It implies that Israel treasures a particular characteristic of personality when that characteristic usually should be regarded as a flaw. It's not that. It's not saying it's a flaw, right? He is brave-hearted and he's a daredevil, but he's also singular and mild. So because he's mild and patient, he sort of gives up on this dream. So B, it suggests, if not a certain characteristic, Israel might not have been easily thwarted. So that could maybe fit. So I'll leave that one blank. C, it shows why Israel would not have been able to undertake the enormous amount of labor necessary. No, it's not saying he couldn't do it. It's saying why he didn't take it by forcing it from the original person. It explains why, when the situation requires it, Israel is able to undertake courageous acts. And it's not about that. Even though it does show he's courageous, it's ultimately showing that because of his patience, he's not taking the next step. Which choice best describes the overall text structure of the text? So I'm going to go sentence by sentence here and break it down. Changes to vegetation cover and other human activities influence carbon and nitrogen levels in soil. Though now how deep these effects extend is unclear. Hypothesizing that differences in land use lead to differences in carbon and nitrogen levels that are not restricted to the topsoil layer. Chukwuemeka Okalu and colleagues sampled soils across multiple land use types within each of several Ethiopian locations. They found, though, that across land use types, carbon and nitrogen decreased to comparably low levels beyond 30 centimeters. Which choice best describes the overall structure of the text? It describes a phenomenon that scientists do not fully understand, explains the research team's hypothesis about that phenomenon, and then describes the finding that led the team to refine the hypothesis. It introduces an unresolved scientific question, presents a research team's hypothesis pertaining to that question. So how does it start? Let's begin with that, right? So changes, though how deep these effects extend is unclear. That's a question that hasn't been solved. So it could be B. Describes a phenomenon that scientists do not fully understand. It could also be A. It discusses a process that some scientists are somewhat unclear about. Okay. That could also be C. And it explains a hypothesis that has been subject of scientific debate. No, it doesn't start by explaining a hypothesis. So I'm going to eliminate D. Hypothesizing that differences in land use lead to differences in carbon and nitrogen levels that are not restricted to the topsoil layer. Akalu and colleagues sampled soils across the multiple land use types within each of several Ethiopian locations. So it describes a process, introduces competing hypotheses about that process. No, there's not competing hypotheses, so it's not that. Explains. it explains the research team's hypothesis about the phenomenon, kind of. Presents a research team's hypothesis, okay. And then describes the finding that led the team to refine. And then describes an observation made by the team. So is it describing a finding or is it describing an observation? So they found, though, that across land use types, carbon decreased to comparatively low levels. So that conflicts with our hypothesis, and that's a finding, so it should be B. Okay, so now let's try the next one here. Okay, so this is a comparing question passage. So let's see how this one works. Okay. Based on the text, how would the author of text 2 most likely respond to the claim in text 1? Text 1, efforts to automate classification of paintings into different artistic styles have had little success, and we have probably reached the technological limit of this work. Furthermore, it's not obvious this is even a useful endeavor, as several critics have argued. Differences between artistic styles are inherently subjective and often not the best way to understand relationships between works. Text 2. Baroque painting utilized a very similar color palette as Renaissance painting did to depict largely the same subjects that Renaissance painting depicted. Automated artistic style classifiers often struggle to draw distinctions between these two styles, but Ravneet Singh, Aurora, and Ahmed Algamal were able to achieve a high degree of accuracy in Baroque and Renaissance comparisons by running one classification model atop another, an approach that demonstrates how much innovation is possible in this realm. Based on the text, how would the author of text 2 most likely respond to the claim in the underlined sentence? Okay, so the claim, right, is that it's hard to automate the classification of paintings. Okay, so now, first of all, I'm going to say, do they agree or do they disagree? And then I'm going to go from there. But Ravneet were able to achieve a high degree of accuracy. So instead of saying there's new people who did achieve accuracy, okay, by running one classification, by using multiple. So by emphasizing there are still advances being made in artistic. So there is an advance talked about in this one. So it could be A. B. By criticizing previous research into automated artistic style classification systems. No, they're not criticizing. They seem to be kind of positive. By arguing that most people are not able to correctly identify the style of paintings that are shown, it's not really about the people, it's about the automated process. By suggesting that people may eventually develop uniform and accepted ideas, it's also not saying that. It's saying that there's advancements by combining models. It can most reasonably be inferred from the text that the finding about the microorganisms' community composition was important for which reason. To understand how temperature changes affects microorganism-mediated cycling of soil nutrients in alpine ecosystems, Eva Kostovska et al. Collected plant soil cores in the Tatra Mountains at elevations around 2,100 meters and transplanted them to elevations of 1,700 to 1,800 meters, where the mean air temperature was warmer by 2 degrees Celsius. Microorganism-mediated nutrient cycling was accelerated in the transplanted cores. Crucially, microorganism community composition was unchanged, allowing Kostovska et al. To attribute the acceleration to temperature-induced increases in microorganism activity. It can most reasonably be inferred from the text that the finding about the microorganism community composition was important for which reason? Okay. A, it provided preliminary evidence that microorganism-mediated nutrient cycling was accelerated in the transplanted cores. B, it suggested the temperature induced changes in microorganism activity may be occurring in increasingly high elevations. Okay. I don't think it's that one either. It ruled out a potential alternative explanation for the acceleration. Okay. And then D, it clarified the microorganism activity levels in the plant soil's core, varied depending on which organisms comprised the community. And I see we got someone who put an answer down. The Soggy Sacks 1176 said this is C. Let's find out if they are correct. So first of all, what is the finding? Microorganism mediated was accelerated in transplanted cores, but the microorganism community composition was unchanged, allowing to attribute the acceleration to temperature-induced increases in microorganism activity. So it's about the temperature, even though it's the same soil, right? So we're moving it. So it's ruling out a potential one. A, it provided preliminary evidence that microorganism was accelerated in transplanted cores. It's not that. B, it suggested that the temperature may be occurring at increasingly high elevations. It's not really about the increasingly high elevations. It's just about the temperature change. And then, so the community composition, right? Why was that important? Because it was saying it wasn't changed because of that. It was changed because of the temperature change. So C makes sense because we're ruling one option out. Clarified, very depending on which. Yeah, it's not that. It is C. So Soggy Sacks is correct. Now let's try this one. Oh, it's a chart or a table. To test whether a medication is effective, scientists compare outcomes for patients taking it and patients taking a placebo, a medically inactive substance. Patients normally aren't told they're receiving a placebo, but a research team conducted a study to see if there might be a medical benefit to telling them. The team used various measures to evaluate participants with higher ratings indicating greater well-being in each measure. Compared to the mean ratings after 21 days for participants in the control group, the mean ratings for participants who were aware of taking a placebo, which choice most effectively uses data to complete from the table to complete the statement. So compared to the mean rating after 21 days for the participants who were taking a placebo, so the control group is one, and these are the ones who are aware of it. So you want to see a higher rating range from 5 to 92, indicating that the well-being varied widely. That's not really what I want to say. We're lower for 2 measures with the participants with the rating for only 1 measure indicating greater well-being for these participants. No, they're higher across the board. Ranged, we're higher for all 3 measures indicating greater overall well-being. So it should be D, range from 3.9 to 46 with no rating indicating greater. No, it's not that one. It is D. Okay. Oh, this is a tricky one. So 11, to investigate potential cognitive benefits of taking leave from work, psychologist Jan Packer and colleague conducted a 6-month study of Australian university staff members who took no leave from work during the study. Took 2 to 4 days of leave or took 1 to 5 weeks of leave. Tests of attentiveness were administered to participants 3 times during the study, at random, for the no leave staff and for the rest, 1 week before their leave, 1 week following their return to work, and 1 week after the second test administration. After analyzing the results, researchers concluded that longer leave times might not confer greater cognitive benefit than shorter leave times do. Which choice best describes data from the graph that supports the researcher's conclusion? So first of all, the conclusion is that longer leave times might not confer greater cognitive benefits. So where is that true? Longer leave times. So that'd be the 1 to 5 weeks of leave, no greater cognitive benefit. So that's the black. The shorter leave time is consistently higher on the test score. So in the first week, the longer leave time seemed to work, but after that, it loses out. In the second test administration, participants test administration. So here it's going to be which one of the researchers concluded the longer leave times might not confer. Okay, so in the second test administration, participants who took 2 to 4 days of leave had a higher average attendance scores than those who took no leave. No, we're not comparing no leave to 2 to 4 days. We're comparing 2 to 4 days to 1 to 5 weeks. Had lower, no, because that's showing the opposite of what we want. And C, in both the second and third test administrations, participants who took 2 to 4 days of leave had higher average attentiveness scores. So C is pointing out what we are saying, right? They do better, actually, the ones who took shorter leave than the ones who took longer leave. And D, in the second and third test, participants who had higher average. Again, that's not comparing the right thing. That's comparing short leave to no leave. We want to compare short leave to long leave. It may seem that the optimal strategy for an animal pursuing prey or escaping predators is to move at maximal speed. But the energy expense of exploiting full speed capacity can disfavor such a strategy, even in escape contexts, as evidenced by the fact that which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to complete the text. So they're saying we would expect the optimal strategy would be to move at maximal speed. Disfavor. So number of lizard species when they escape. Okay. Most lizard species use about the same percentage of their maximal speed when escaping as they do when pursuing prey. Multiple lizards move at an average of less than. So we're saying that this one works because it's saying that some species move at less than their max. So that could be it. This is not about, we're not comparing pursuing versus escaping. We're comparing high percentage versus not. More lizard species use on average 90 to 100% of their maximal speed. No, that's not it either. At least 4 lizard species use on average less than 100% of their maximal speed. No, it's not about losing less than 100%. It's about losing less than 90 to 100. So it has to be B. Poetry is a 1919 poem by Marianne Moore. The poem highlights an ambivalence to poetry as the speaker acknowledges its merits while also expressing a sense of pleasure. Writing, so we want to see something that gives an ambivalence, showing both displeasure and benefits. So in this one, we have nor is it valid to discriminate against business documents, school books, and all these phenomena are important. One must make a distinction, however, when dragged into prominence. No, neither of those are really about the benefits and the negatives. When poems become so derivative as to become unintelligible, the same thing may be said for all of us, that we do not admire, that we cannot understand. No, that's just being negative. D, reading poetry, however, with a perfect contempt for it. So that's like a hatred. One discovers that there is in it, after all, a place for the genuine. So it's like you hate it, but then you actually discover something good about it. So that shows an ambivalence because you're crossing both negative and positive. Okay. So now we have 14. The Cretaceous pterosaur Tupandactylus navigans is known for having an anomalously oversized head crest. Until an almost complete fossil skeleton was found in Brazil, paleontologists had been able to study only skull specimens from T. navigans. Though it was presumed that, like other pterosaurs, the species' primary form of locomotion was powered flight. Examining the fuller skeleton in 2016, Victor Beccari and his team determined that T. navigans had long hind legs, short wings, and an unusually long neck. Characteristics that, combined with the creature's large crested head, would have made sustained flight difficult and walking upright relatively comfortable. Based on these findings, the team suggested the T navigans likely. Okay. So the findings are telling us that they walk more and probably don't fly that much. So let's see. Flew for longer distances than did others? No, because it's saying they're kind of not good for flying. Had longer wings than others, considered to have been comfortable walking? No. Had a smaller head than researchers expected based? No. Flew for shorter distances and spent more time walking than researchers. Exactly. Okay, because it's telling us there would have made sustained flight difficult, so they can't fly for long, and it would have made walking upright comfortable, so they could do that for a long time. Okay. Some ethicists hold that the moral goodness of an individual's actions themselves, or some ethicists hold that the moral goodness of an individual's actions depends solely on whether the actions themselves are good, irrespective of the context in which they are carried out. Philosopher L. Sebastian Purcell has shown that surviving works of Aztec philosophy express a very different view. Purcell reveals that these works posit an ethical system in which an individual's actions are judged in light of how well they accord with the individual's role in society and how well they contribute to the community. To the extent that these works are representative of Aztec thought, Purcell's analysis suggests that blank. Which choice most logically completes the text? The Aztecs would have disputed the idea that the morality of an individual's actions can be assessed by appealing to standards of behavior that are independent of individual social circumstances. The Aztecs would not have accepted the notion that the morality of an individual's actions can be fairly evaluated by people who do not live in the same society as that individual. Actions by members of Aztec society contributed a great deal to their community could be judged as morally good, even if those actions were inconsistent with behaviors the Aztecs regarded as good in all contexts. Similar actions performed by people in different societal roles in Aztec society would have been regarded as morally equivalent unless those actions led to. Okay. So, what are we told that the Aztecs believed? They had a different view of what? That goodness is irrespective of context, right? So, they think goodness is going to be it. Good, Daniel. Yeah, go take a practice test. That's good. Now, with the Purcell reveals that these works posit an ethical system in which an individual's actions are judged in light of how well they accord with the individual's role in society. So the actions have to tie in with the society. So it'd be A. The Aztecs would have disputed the idea that the morality can be assessed by appealing standards of better can be assessed to standards of behavior that are independent. So they would go against that idea, right? That's why it says disputes. That's what they disagree with. They believe that it has to tie in. B is wrong, would not accept the notion because it's not about not being able to assess it from outside. And it's not about this because they're about having it be consistent. And it is not this one either. Similar actions performed by people would have been regarded as morally equivalent. Nope. Yeah, because again, you need them to connect to the context. Okay, so now we're under standard conventions. The Boston Saloon was one of the most popular African American owned establishments in the 19th century Nevada by businessman William A.G. Brown. The saloon was known to offer elegant accommodations. So notice here all the words that create, they're just different versions of it. So it's in the past tense. So it was created in the past. So it has to be created, not creates, not creating, not create, because we're dealing with the past tense here. To get a 780 math score, I'm about to do a math section. You need to get all the questions right on the first section. Let's just start with that. You can't be missing questions on the first section. You can miss 2 questions maximum. and they'd have to be hard questions at the very end of the section. It is pretty hard to get 780. Possible, but it is hard. I would say it's a lot easier to get 750. And obviously you're like, of course, 750 is easier than 780, but I think there's a big gap. Okay, so I think it's definitely possible. I don't know how you've been doing on them, but it is hard. In a painting titled The Milkmaid by Johann Vermeer, the artist prominently features a bread basket, milk pitcher, and bowl. Such quotidian objects depicted in exquisite detail by Vermeer, a painter celebrated for his naturalism. Blank, the daily minutia. Okay, so is the here we have an independent clause right here, or not an independent clause, a parenthetical phrase. So really, we could take that out and just say such quotidian objects. Objects is plural, so we have to have a plural one. Was revealing, has revealed, reveals, and D revealed. The only one that's plural is that one, and that sort of gives us a hint of what the question is asking, right? It's about plural versus non-plural and having the subject and the verb agree in number. Physical materials can be classified by how much light passes through them. Clear glass, which is classified as transparent, allows all or almost all light to pass. Wax paper, which is classified as translucent, allows only some light to pass through. Which choice completes the text? Okay. So we have to pass through. So if you check the answer choices, it's testing whether it's an independent clause or not. So you have to do here. In the first part, physical materials can be classified. That's an independent clause. Wax paper allows only some. So they're both independent clauses. So which one has the proper punctuation to separate independent clauses? It is C. Okay, and I see another question here. So I'll try my best to answer it before I do this question. It's from Golden Hawk. Okay, so when you don't know any of the words in the vocab, what you really need to do is try to classify the words and think, is this word positive or negative? Am I looking for a more positive word or a negative word? You could use roots to try to help you too, but otherwise it's going to throw you off. If you don't know any of the words, you really have to try to know any type of like vague sense of what they mean. If you have not even a vague sense, then that's going to be difficult there. All right, so I'll try this one here. In her 1983 book, The Managed Heart. In her 1983 book, The Managed Heart, Commercialization of Human Feelings, sociologist Russell Hochschild first explored at length her conception of a sociology of emotions. The idea that the various cultural and ideological frameworks a person has internalized, class, gender, political affiliation, blank, each emotional reaction that person has within a situation. Which choice completes the text that it conforms? So if we look at the answer choices, we have underlies, is underlying, underlie, has been underlying. So it's the difference of tense, kind of, but it's really more a difference of number. So the whole thing here, the idea that the various culture, well, so what underlies? It's the various cultural and ideological frameworks. That's plural. So it's going to be underlie. We need underlie, and we can see, we get that hint of what it is here because that's the only one that's different from the others. All the others are singular. Okay, so Daniel asked a question. One more question. I have a 720 reading and 690 math. I want to get 1500. Do you think I'm being optimistic? Too optimistic with wanting a 740 reading and a 760 math. I wouldn't say it's too optimistic. I would say it is optimistic. What you need to do is go through every practice test you've taken and check the questions you missed and try to make notes to yourself on why you missed them. And I would say that it might be easier to actually improve the 740 reading to get to a 750 and get that math also to a 750 It really depends on what you're missing. If you're missing grammar, you really got to nail down grammar. If everyone's listening right now, the 3 sections that are the easiest on the verbal section are grammar, transitions, and rhetorical synthesis. It's the end of the test, which is what I'm doing now. If you want to be getting a 740 on reading, you got to get those basically at 100%. So now let's try this one. And here I'll show you, before I even read this passage, I can look at the answer choices and tell you right away it's about independent versus dependent clauses. Because the colon, semicolon, semicolon, this is setting up an independent clause situation. It's not about tense or anything like that. So let's see. Latin America is known to have dozens, if not hundreds, of popular dance forms. Only 5 of these dances are included in the International Ballroom Dance: rumba, samba, cha-cha, paso doble, and jive. The last of which is grouped with the other Latin dances, despite not having Latin roots. Okay, so it's however. And then for this one, for 20, however, is going to be. Okay, so first of all, we have 2 independent clauses. Only 5 of these dances are included. The last of which are actually, we don't have 2 independent. We don't have 2 independent clauses, but it's not going to be B, because there the however is not totally connected. But we have a list. So the list sets up that we want a colon to go with that list, because a colon introduces a list. So it's A, exactly, Golden Hawk. And then on the question of the accuracy of the test, here, people could look at this question while I answer this. The practice tests, I would say, are pretty accurate. I think most people score within 50 points of the test. Usually they score a little lower than on the practice test, but I would say maybe 60% of the time people are scoring a little lower, and 40% of the time they're scoring a little higher, and you're within 50 points in either direction. So sometimes people get they just like burst out and get a close to 100 points greater than on their practice tests, but that is hard to do. Yeah, so I guess with a 720 and 690, if you study really hard today and tomorrow, that's possible for sure, but it's hard. So which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Also, I'm only talking about Blue Book practice tests, by the way. Other tests, other companies, I'm not sure if I trust those. For thousands of years, humans have used domesticated goats to clear land of unwanted vegetation. When it comes to their diets, goats are notoriously indiscriminate. And then something else, they will devour all kinds of shrubs, weeds, leaving virtually no other part of any plant unconsumed. A, indiscriminate, and so we have independent clauses again, right? So there's an independent clause here. Goats are notoriously indiscriminate. They will devour all kinds of shrubs. So they're both independent clauses. So we're going to want to separate the independent clauses here. And the only way to do that is D with a colon, because we need a comma and a fanboys, or a period or a semicolon or a colon, and only D has one of those. Okay. And yeah, I think Golden Hawk strategy, I would agree with that. That's a good strategy for this one. 1450 is a fantastic score, by the way. It's really good. Working together with Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources, Dr. Lanny Sinayuni analyzed data about snowpack levels in the Chusca Mountains. She found that snowpack was deepest in early March at lower elevations. At higher elevations, blank, the snowpack was deepest in mid-March. Okay, so they're creating a contrast, and this is a transition one. So in other words, they're not saying the same thing in a different way. It's not an example. And then on the other hand, okay, so if this is your last test, it's going to be hard to get a 1500. If you can, I would study as much as you can tomorrow, so that Friday you're not going to fry yourself and you can rest a bit. I would look at all the practice tests. If you want, you can send me any question you have questions on any of the practice tests, and I'll try to explain it. And yeah, I mean, honestly, a 1400 is already really good. So if you get that, that's great. And 1450, also very good. Which choice completes the most logical transition? According to Duverger's laws, countries with single ballot majoritarian elections for single member districts tend to polarize into two-party systems, wherein dueling political parties consistently dominate the political system. Blank countries with proportional representation tend to support. So one is single ballot majoritarian and the other one's proportional representation. So that, again, there's a contrast. So it's going to be conversely. Subsequently is like leading into it. For instance, it's giving an example. In other words, it's just restating something in different words. All right, and stick around, everyone. I'm going to do math just after I finish this. Math goes a lot faster because I don't have to read a bunch of things. I don't have to explain as much. I can just work it out. A turtle shell appears external to the animal, protecting its body like armor. Blank, the shell is often incorrectly assumed to be an exoskeleton, a rigid outer casing that, like that of a crustacean or an insect, when in fact it is an endoskeleton, a part of the turtle's internal bone structure, more akin to a spine or a pair of ribs. Okay, so what's the relationship between the part before and the part after here? So a turtle shell appears external to the animal, protecting its body like armor. So this leads to this, right? That's why it's often incorrectly assumed to be an exoskeleton. So this explains it. So it could be like thus or therefore. So that being said as a contrast, however, as a contrast, for instance, that's up to an example, it's hence. All right, let's see. So there was more chat activity. So let's see. I think 1450 in a mid-tier uni, I think that's a good chance. Sadly, I think right now with the way things are going politically in the US, it's hard for international students to get the best scholarships that they used to be able to get. But honestly, a 1450 is very strong. And yeah, you just have to find the right university that will do that. But I think you would have a good chance. I think it's possible to get a 1400 from 1150 to 1200, but honestly, that's very unlikely, to be honest. It'll be hard to do. You would need, I think it's more likely to get like a 1250, which is still well above average. And if this is the first time you're taking it, that's a great place to start. And you can definitely get 1400 eventually. I'm just saying, I don't think you could get a 1400 2 days from now. But for the March test, which is the next one, I'm sure you get a 1400 if you study at it. All right, so I'll try this one here. In retrospect, one of the lessons of the 2003 Human Genome Project is that a gene is affected by many factors, not the least of which is its interaction with the protein products of other genes. Blank. Rather than just focusing on the human genome, efforts to better understand gene mutations related to disease have begun to consider the human proteome the complete set of proteins expressed by human genes. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? So in retrospect is a gene, not least of which it is interactions with the human project. Okay, so what's the relationship between before the blank and after the blank? The second part is kind of explained by the fourth part again. That said as a contrast, for examples, giving an example, we're not doing examples. In other words, we're not restating the thing, so it has to be accordingly. And yeah, I agree with Daniel. If you're starting now and you're trying to get up to 1400 by March, totally possible. You could even get 1450 by then, but just not in 2 days, if that was what you were asking. Student wants to, many of my students usually go up by 200-300 points. That's pretty typical. Getting 400 points and up is a lot harder, but also there's not that many points available. So that's hard. The student wants to emphasize the similarity between the two sculptures. So now I look at the choices. I used to say just do the answer choices, but they're getting harder. They're making these questions harder. So you want to look at the passage after seeing the two sculptures. Elizabeth Catlett's sculpture recognition shows two African American figures with rounded, indistinct features. The figures reach out to each other in a pose that symbolizes close supportive. Okay. Her sculpture Student Aspire shows two African American figures. The figures hold an equal sign above their head with one hand and embrace each other with the other hand. The poets symbolize support for each other in their pursuit of equality. So depicts two figures supporting. So this one only focuses on one. This one only focuses on their time of date. Both show figures, African American figures in poses. Okay, that should be it. Have features that are rounded, while the figures, so that shows a contrast. So it should be this one here. Okay, now let's see. 27, the last one, and make sure to stick around. I'm going to go immediately into the math for this test. That'll be quicker. Student wants to indicate which category most routine diplomatic correspondence belongs in, based on how sensitive information is classified. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information? Okay, the U.S. government classifies sensitive information based on, according to the degree to which disclosure could affect the nation's security. Information that could cause damage is classified as confidential. Information that could cause serious damage is classified as secret. Most routine diplomatic correspondence, if disclosed, could cause damage, but not serious damage. Okay, there they talk about most routine. Okay. So most routine belongs in, so if it's causing damage, but not serious damage, that would be confidential. So let's see which one tells us that there. If disclosed, communications could affect the nation's security. Nope. Having the potential to damage national security if disclosed. Most routine diplomatic is classified as confidential. Should be that one. According to the U.S. government, which classifies such sensitive information as routine, could damage if disclosed. Nope. Most routine diplomatic is classified according to degree. That just is giving us details on that, but it's not telling us how it's classified. Okay, so now we're done with the second part. And we're about to do math. 10-minute break, but we're not going to take the whole break. Don't worry. Wrong on 3 questions were silly mistakes. Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, silly mistakes are killer. And you do want to get the first module all correct. So let's start it up. Resume. A veterinarian recommends that each day a certain rabbit should eat 25 calories per pound of the rabbit's weight. Which plus 11, an additional 11 calories? Which equation represents the situation? So 25 calories per pound. When you have per, you're multiplying there. So we're going to be multiplying 25 by the pounds, which is in X pounds. So it's going to be 25X plus 11D. This is just conceptual. There's no math to do. You'll see that a lot of the test is like that. A special camera is used for underwater ocean research. The camera is at a depth of 39 fathoms. What is the camera's depth in feet? So 39 fathoms. You could set up a little chart here. I could do this in my head, but I'm going to work it out. 39 fathoms times, so 6 feet is in 1 fathom. I know to put fathom on the bottom because I want that unit to cancel. This is called dimensional analysis, which you do in chemistry and physics a lot. So it's 39 times 6. Am I going to use Desmos? No, I'm not even going to write this out. It has to be bigger than 39. And it has to be multiplying. 39 times 5 is almost 200 already, so it has to be A, okay? So use the answer choices to help you and not do calculations out. Why multiply when you can just use the answer choices? In the figure, line M is parallel to line N, and line K intersects both. Lines, which of the following statements is true? Okay, so they're across, so they have to be equal. So it is C here, right? The vertical angles are equal. Again, have I done any calculations? No. So let's see this one. Function f represents the total cost of attending an arcade game when X games are played. How many games can be played for a total cost of $58? So I plug in. I could use Desmos, but I don't need to use Desmos. So I'm going to do 58 equals 14 plus 4x. Subtract 14, so I get 44 equals 4x. Divide by 4x equals 11. And that is the answer. Okay. So feel free to use Desmos if you want. If you want to use Desmos here, you could just do like 58 equals 14 plus 4x. Zoom out and see this here. But I don't see that as being very much easier, honestly. Okay, 4x minus 28 equals negative 24. What is the value of x minus 7? So I noticed that this x minus 7 is this divided by 4, right? X is 4x divided by 4, negative 7. So I'm just going to divide negative 24 by 4, and I get negative 6. I don't actually need to solve for x or anything on this one. They love to have these little tricks for you baked in. The amount of Hannah's bill for food was $50. Hannah gave a 20% tip of the amount of the bill was the amount. So if she's giving a 20% tip, so you're just going to do 20 over 100 times 50. And that is going to be 10. Okay. So that is it for that one. Okay, now we're moving. Now we're flying through this. Math is so much easier for me to explain because I don't have to read the whole passages and every dang question answer choice. 5 Eretmoculus and Brodica, a type of sea turtle, each have a nest. The table shows an original data set of the number of eggs that each turtle laid in its nest. A sixth nest with 121 eggs is added to create a new data set. Which of the following correctly compares the means of the two data sets? So we're adding a sixth nest with 121 eggs. Am I going to calculate the means? No, because we're just comparing. That value is below all these values. So we're bringing down the mean. So the mean of the original is greater than the mean of the new one. If they had given me this value being somewhere in here, then maybe I'd have to calculate. But because it's lower than everything, I know it's going to drop it. Okay. So again, very little actual calculating so far, just logically. Shaded region represents the solution to which inequality? So you could graph it and figure it out. But first of all, okay, so it's all, I like to plug in a value. So if I plug in 0, 0, 0, 0 works, right? It's shaded in. So which ones here it has 0 working? Here it'd be 0 is less than negative 1. That doesn't work. 0 less than negative 1. That doesn't work. 0 greater. Yeah, that works. And 0 greater than negative 1. They both work. But the slope of the line is negative slope. I don't even have to worry because they're all 3. So it has to be D, right? Again, no, not too much math. Still not having to use Desmos too much. Which expression is equivalent? Okay, this one's trickier. You want like terms, and this negative here throws everything off. So we have 8 minus negative 2, 8 plus 2. That's going to be 10. So it's not A, it's not D. 8x cubed minus x cubed is going to be 7x cubed. That's going to be B as in buzzing. Okay. Also, if anyone has questions as we do this, feel free to ask. If you think of new ways to do it, let me know. Which equation defines the line? Okay, let's use Desmos for this, just for kicks and giggles. So you can add a table. Sure, many people know this already. And just do 0, 9. Then do 17 for the y. 1 here. And then, let me make this. Okay, so then we have this linear regression, 8x plus 9. D. Nice and clean. Makes our life a lot easier. What is the solution to the given equation? Okay, so if I add 7, right, I'm going to get parentheses, D minus 30, D plus 30. Also, once this video is done, if you guys want to see more, for the November test, I did a walkthrough of practice test 4 if you want to do something similar situation. So then here, D is 30 or negative 30. You can put either one in. I'm going to put 30 just because then I don't have to write that little negative symbol, but it doesn't matter. A store sells 2 different size containers of blueberries. The store's sales of these blueberries totaled $896.86 last month. The equation 4.51x plus 6.07y equals 896.86 represents the situation, where x is the number of smaller containers sold and y is the number of larger containers sold. According to the equation, what is the price in dollars of each smaller container? Okay. So this one is logicking out, right? So x is the number of smaller containers and y is the number of larger containers. So to get to this, that's the total value. So these must be the amount per container. So it's asking what is the price in dollars of each smaller container? It's 4.51 because we're multiplying price by the number of boxes or number of containers. Oh, we have an exponential here. The function f models the intensity of an X-ray beam and a number of particles in the X-ray beam T millimeters below the surface of a sample of iron. According to the model, what is the estimated number of particles in the X-ray beam when it is at its surface of the sample of iron? Okay. T millimeters below the surface. So here, when it is at the surface, so the surface would be 0. So we would plug in 0 to that equation. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So it's going to be 500 times 1, which is just 500. It's A. The tricky thing is knowing what to plug in. So you need to understand the context there. And remember, in math, the questions get harder as you go, and section 2 will be harder than section 1 if we did well in section 1. Which of the following, the graph of the rational function f is shown where y equals f of x and x is greater than or equal to 0. Which of the following is the graph of f of x plus 5? So we're adding to the function itself, so we're moving up 5. This is moving down 5. This is stretching. It's not really moving up. This is moving sideways. Oh yeah, I think maybe this one's moving sideways, but this one's moving up 5. So it is D, right? Simple shift up because we're adding to the function, not to x. If we're adding to x, that's when we do horizontal shifts. C in terms of P. Which equation correctly expresses C in terms of P? So I'm going to distribute the n. P equals 19n. Actually, I'll divide by n. That makes my life easier. So P over n equals 19 minus C. You could do it the other way, but I'm just not going to do that. Then I'll subtract 19 minus 19 equals negative C. Then I'm going to divide by negative 1. C equals 19 minus P over n. And that is anyone? Yes, it is D. And maybe I'm going fast on these. I usually like to do these quickly as though I were taking it. I do math all the time with my regular videos and I'll walk through things more. And if you have questions as I'm doing these, please feel free to ask. The length of each edge of a box is 29 inches. Each side of the box is in the square shape of a square. The box does not have a lid. What is the exterior surface area in square inches of this box without a lid? So a normal cube, right, has 6 sides. This is only going to have 5 sides because we don't have a lid. So instead of doing 6s squared, we're going to do 5s squared. S squared is going to be 29. So here I will use a calculator. I will use our friend over here. So it's going to be 29 times 29 times 5. And it is 4205. And that is the answer there. It just, they make it a little complicated by saying there's no lid, but if you realize that just taking away a surface, you go from there. What is the sum of solutions? Oh, we could calculate it, but why? We could just graph too. X minus 9 plus 45 equals 63. I feel like I'm more anti this than a lot of people, but I still use it. So one solution is -9, one solution is 27. So then it'll be 27 minus 9, and you get 18. I could have done that in my head, but I was in the mood for. What is the tan of 92 pi over 3? So you could plug this in, I think. Let's try it out. You could just type pi. So that makes it all over it. So we have to do like this over 3. And then it's negative, so you could eliminate this and this. And it's bigger than 1, so it has to be A. The way you could think about it too is that 92 pi over 3 is equals 30 pi and 2 pi over 3. The 30 pi goes away because every 2 pi revolution goes away. It cancels out. So it's just what is tan of 2 pi over 3? If you drew out the unit circle, you would go around here. You would end up in this region. Tan is negative in this region. 2 pi over 3 creates a reference angle of pi over 3, which is a 60-degree angle. And tan of 60 degrees is √3. But calculator was obviously quicker. This is kind of a newer question that I started adding on. I didn't see too much of that when the new SAT came out, but now it's coming. Which expression is equivalent to 42a over k plus 42ak, where k is greater than 0? So let's see the choices here. We have 84. So that's all over k. So it seems like we're combining fractions. This is good to look at the choices to get a sense of what they're asking for. So we're going to have 42a over k plus 42ak squared, because we're going to multiply that by k to get a k on the bottom. So now we have 42a plus 42ak squared over k. And now we can factor out a 42a. I wonder if Daniel's still watching this, if he's doing the math along with us, or if he has gone on to greener pastures. So it is that there, and that is D as in dog. With these, you really want to look at the answer choices to get a sense of what they're asking for, because it could be, the expression could be equivalent in many different ways. Here, by seeing it's all over k, I could tell that it was about combining the fractions by adding them with a common denominator. Graph the equation is a circle in the plane. Which of the following is a possible value for A? The point AB lies on the circle. Okay, let's graph it just to see. We could maybe do this one purely with something else, but it's not letting me erase this. Okay. So let's do this to get a sense here. Okay, so now we have the edges, right? The A is an X value. So what's the edge of the X value? It covers everything here. But basically it doesn't go beyond 7. And it doesn't go beyond -15. Okay. So it can't be -16, can't be 11, and it can't be that. So it has to be B. Okay. You could also do this by thinking, okay, the X center is -4. The radius is 11, so I have to add 11, and that gets me 7. And I can do -4 minus 11, and that gets me -15. It has to be somewhere between that. Okay, now here is the next one. A right rectangular prism has a height of 9 inches. The length of the prism's base is x inches, which is 7 more inches than the width. Which function gives the V volume in cubic inches in terms? Okay, so the height is 9. So remember, volume is volume equals length times width times height. Volume equals the height is 9. Width, the length is x, which is 7 more than the width, the prism's base. So then it's x, and then the prism's base must be x minus 7. So that is going to be D. I think the thing that throws people off is seeing 7 more. They add it on and they get C. But we're told you have to define each term and see which is which. So the X is the longer one here. Okay, so then for 21, it is D. Okay, and now we're on to our last one here. These are like the hardest in this section. That one wasn't too bad. I'm guessing section 2 will be significantly harder at the end, but let's see. Function f is defined by f of x equals a root x plus b, where a and b are constants. In the xy plane, the graph of y equals f of x passes through the point -24, 0, and f of 24 is less than 0. Which of the following must be true? A f of 0 equals 24, f of 0 equals -24, a is greater than b, and d, a is less than b. Okay, now we are cooking with gas. This one is a real challenge here. So when x is -24, a and b are constants, right? A can't be 0 because then the equation would always be 0. So let's just write out some truths about this. A does not equal 0. So a is some value. So f of x, f of 0, -24 sets us up like this. Look, a square root -24 plus b, and that equals 0. So this part has to be 0. -24 plus b equals 0. So then b equals 24. Okay. Okay, so now that we know that b is 24, what can we figure out from there? F of 24 is less than 0. So what happens with that? F of 24 is less than 0. So let's plug that in. F of 24 equals a 24 plus 24 is less than 0. So root 48, a root 48 is less than 0. This is a positive, so how do we get a negative? A has to be negative. A is less than 0. So if a is less than 0 and b equals 24, a is less than b, and that is D. All right, if you have questions on this one, feel free to ask. I'll give you all 10 seconds to think about it. Okay, so now let's go on to the next one. All right, and we start off easy again. So right triangle has lengths 11 and 9. What is the length of the triangle hypotenuse in centimeters? So it has legs. This is a classic. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. 11 squared plus 9 squared equals c squared. 121 plus 81 equals c squared. C equals root 202. And that is B. And I didn't even need to do the math. I shouldn't have done the math, to be honest. I should have just seen 11 is bigger than 40, and then you have the square root. But Sestlevy, this one here, for the linear function h, the graph of y equals h of x in the xy plane passes through point 721 and 925. Which equation defines h? Okay, back to our handy dandy Desmos. And yeah, we can definitely go over the questions once you finish. We can go over them. Just keep me posted on where you're at. So in this one, I'm going to use the table. Again, see, I'm a professional tutor. And I'm trying to do this so that people who can't afford tutoring can get some help without having to pay anything. So everything's always free with me. Just about timing. So it's 2x plus 7, and that is B. Okay, a company that produces socks wants to estimate the percent. Oh, wait. I remembered I messed this one up. Oh, wait, did I mess this up? Oh, no, I didn't mess it up. What am I talking about? Okay, number 3. A company that produces socks wants to estimate the percent of the socks produced in a typical week that was defective. A random sample of 310 socks produced in a certain week were inspected. Based on the sample, it is estimated that 12% of all socks produced by that company in this week are defective, with an associated margin of error of 3.62%. Based on the estimated and associated margin of error, which is the following most appropriate conclusion about all socks produced during this week? 12% of all socks produced are defective with a 3.62. So the 12% is like the baseline defect. So 12% of socks are defective. That sounds tempting, but it's not saying that's exactly the value. That's like around the value. So this, the more than, that's too high because it has to be between it. So what you would do is you could subtract and find it. So you could do 12 plus 3.62. That's one value, and 12 minus 3.62. So it's most likely going to be between 8.38 and 15.62. It is B. That's what margin of error means. It's like there's a high probability of being within 3.62% of 12%. All right, let's go to number 4. A truck can haul a maximum of 5,630 pounds. During one trip, the truck will be used to haul a 190-pound piece of equipment as well as several crates. Some of these crates weigh 25 pounds each and another weighs 62 pounds each. Which inequality represents the possible combinations of the number 25-pound crates X and the number 62-pound crates Y that can haul one trip if only one piece of equipment can, if only the piece of equipment in the crates are being hauled. So there's a 190-pound piece of equipment. So we have to take that away from 5630. So it's not 5630. It's going to be this. And it has to be less than, because that's the max weight, not the minimum weight. So it has to be A. Now, for A, we have that. And it makes sense because X is the 25-pound weights and Y is the 62-pound weights, and they're being multiplied by their weights. Okay, what is the solution to the given system of equations? We could solve, but I'll do it here. This is not a bad one to solve on paper too, but it is here -2, -5c. 23, what is the range? It's the minimum and the maximum minus the minimum. 52 minus 23 is going to be 29. Two customers purchased the same kind of bread and eggs at a store. The first customer paid $12.45 for one loaf of bread and 2 dozen eggs. The second customer paid $19.42 for 4 loaves of bread and 1 dozen eggs. What is the cost in dollars of 1 dozen eggs? So this is, we're making equations here. Two customers purchased the same kind of bread. The first customer paid $12.45. So let's say 1B plus 2E equals $12.45. And then 1E plus 4B equals 1942. And we want to find what E equals. We could say B is X and E equals Y. So it's going to be X plus 2Y equals 12.45. 4X plus Y equals 19.42. And we get 4.34 for the Y. You have to be careful not to do 3.77. That's the bread. It will be D. Okay, now here, if the given equations are graphed in the XY plane, at how many points do the graphs of the equations intersect? Let's see. I'm just putting some comments in the chat for people to see. Okay. And the given equations are graphed at how many points do the graphs? So might as well graph it, right? So this is a parabola, that's that. So it wouldn't be infinitely many. Could be 0, could be exactly 1. So we'll find out. Y equals 18. -3 parentheses x minus 18 squared plus 15. They do not intersect anywhere. So it seems like it is D. Okay. You could see that too because this is vertex form. The vertex tells you that the Y value is 15. The X value is and then once you see that the vertex is that and that it's facing down, it'll never actually get up to 18. Okay, now. Next question. Wow, a lot of systems of equations. What is the greatest possible value of x? Let's find out. These are just nice and clean. They're just plain. X squared plus 16x plus 63. Well, we'll throw people off. The silly mistake they would make is they'll put this value down. Oh, actually, it's not even here. So it would be -6. Sometimes they might have -9 on here too. Let me put that, but it's just -6. It's A. In the XY plane, line P has a slope of -5, 3, and an x-intercept of -6, 0. What is the y coordinate of the line of the slope? Okay, so how do we find this? Well, we could do it's x-intercept, not a y-intercept. So that's what throws us off here. So you could do y. Let's do slope-intercept form, or not slope-intercept form. Point slope form. So it's y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. And you're going to get the point y minus 0 equals -5/3 x plus 6. Y equals -5/3. -5/3 times 6 is going to become 6 divided by 3 is 2. It's going to become -10. Now this naturally just fell into vertex slope intercept form, and the intercept would be -10. You could graph that to check, but you should just know that that's the slope intercept form is when y is completely isolated. How many solutions does this equation have? We're going to have 12x on one side. We're going to have -3x on the other side. So we could find it and be exactly 1. It'd be A. But if you doubted me, plug it in. Sure. Might as well. And the fact that there's this one value tells us that it works, right? It's 0, 0. Okay, Lonnie. And remember, this isn't asking for the actual value. It's asking for how many solutions there are. Okay, now let's see this one here. Okay, Kailani used fabric measuring 5 yards in length to make each suit for a men's choir. The relationship between the number of suits that Kailani made, X, and the total length of fabric that she purchased, Y in yards, is represented by the equation Y minus 5X. What is the best interpretation of 6 in this? Okay, interesting. This one's more abstract. So X is the total length of the fabric. Oh no. Number of suits is X. Sorry, and the total length of the fabric she purchased is Y. So length of fabric minus that, purchase 6 more yards of fabric than she used. So this is like the remainder of the yards of fabric, the 6. So it's not purchased 6 total yards, no. Made 6 suits, no. The sits is the X. And did not do that. It's the remainder. It's the Kailani purchased. So this one's a good process elimination question where only D makes sense. Which quadratic equation has no real solutions? Okay. First of all, if the signs between A and C are opposite, you have a solution. So it's not going to be C. It's not going to be A. Now it's going to be either B or D. I guess you could graph them as be the easiest way instead of doing discriminant work. So it's going to be x squared minus 14x plus 49. That crosses it. And then the other one is going to be 5x squared. That one does not cross it. So D is the answer here. It does not cross. The function is defined by the given equation. The equation can be rewritten as 1 plus p over 100, where p is a constant. Which of the following is closest? Okay, so first let's rewrite it as 1 plus p over 100. And then have it still be x over 4, right? So notice that. That's key, that it's over x over 4. So it's going to be 1 plus it's going to be 1 plus 84 over 100 to the x over 4. Okay. Now that's not an answer choice, right? P is not 84, but also we don't have it be x over 4. So how do we get rid of that? Okay. Let me see. This one's trickier. Okay, let me think. So on this one, if anyone has ideas, you could put them in the comments. But what you want to think about is really, I guess, that 1.84 to the x over 4 is really 1.84 to the 1/4 times to the x, right? So let's find what that is. I don't know how to do that in my head. So this is definitely calculator. And it's 1.16. So that 1/6 is, I think it's going to go over 100. So it has to be 16 over 100. They want to trick you with B by just saying like, oh, you have to divide by 84 to get rid of it or something, or multiply. No, we just want to do A. Okay, now let's try this one. In the given system of equations, P is a constant. The system has no solution. What is the value of P? So no solution means that the slope is the same. So let's move all the P's. Let's move all the W's to the same side and have the R's on the same side. So on the top has the left equals PW. The other, I'm going to write the 7R here. I'm going to add 5W to both sides equals 10W plus 11. So to go from 7R to 7R, there's no change. I'm just multiplying by 1. So to keep the slope the same, we're going to have to multiply 10 by 1. So it's going to be 10. Okay. Now we have this one here. Wow, it's almost 11:30. Time really has gone by. Okay. The graph equals of y equals 2x squared plus bx plus c is shown where b, what is the value of bc? So c is the y-intercept. So that is -6. Okay, and now b, right? So negative b over 2a is the axis of symmetry. Here, the axis of symmetry happens at -1. A equals 2, so it's negative b over 2 times 2 equals -1. Negative b equals -4. B equals 4. BC, 4 times -6, and it's going to be -24. That was a trickier one. Now we're getting to the good stuff. If C and D are positive constants, which equation could define F? Okay, f of x plus 19 is shown. So f of x would be 19 down from this. Okay, C and D are both positive. So the slope is negative, so it has to be minus cx. So it can't be C, can't be D. And then D has to be -2, so it has to be -D. So it is A. Because D and C are positive, and we actually want the y-intercept and the slope both be negative, we have to do negative of each of them. What is the area square unit of triangle ADE? AB equals √34 AC equals 3. CE equals 21. So AE equals 24. Okay, so the ratio of the big to the small is 8 to 1, right? Because 24 divided by 3 equals 8. Okay, so now BC equals 34 minus 3 squared equals square root of that. It's going to equal 25. I'm using Pythagorean theorem to find BC equals 5. So the area of that is going to be 3 times 5 divided by 2. Now, the area of the whole thing is going to be 64 times that. Because if one side length is an 8 ratio, the area ratio is going to be 8 squared. So 8 squared three times 5 divided by 2 gets me 480. Okay. So I don't have to actually find the sides because I can just use the ratio of areas to find it. All right. Now here it is. The result of increasing the quantity x by 400% is 60. What is the value of x? So we're increasing by 400%, not 400% of. So it's going to be x plus 400%. So 400 over 100x equals 60. So x plus 4x equals 60. 5x equals 60. X equals 12. Nice and clean. The hardest thing people make here is they'll do B instead of A. All right, we're almost done here. We're almost done. Actually, I'm playing a circle that has center C with coordinates HK. Points A and B lie on the circle. Point A has H plus 1 and K plus 102. And ACB is a right angle. What is the length of AB? Okay, let's just try to imagine this. Now we're getting to the nitty gritty. Okay, this is going to be vastly unproportional, but this is H plus 1. So this is a distance of 1. AB. Okay, so center C, A is here, B is here. This is root 102. What is the length of AB? Let's see this here. Oh, I see my issue. I drew it wrong. Let me start over. So we have C here. And then let's go this way. This is H plus 1 K plus root 102. So the radius R is going to be 1 squared plus root 102 squared square rooted. So this is 103. And this is root 103. So this is going to be root 103 squared plus root 103 squared equals AB squared. So it's going to become 103 plus 103 equals AB squared. AB equals 206 square rooted. And that is an answer choice. It is A. Okay, tricky. I misread it at first. The most important thing is to try to draw it out and understand that there's a radius going on. Otherwise, you're screwed. Okay, and then this one here for an electric field passing through a flat surface perpendicular to it. The electric flux of the electric field through the surface is the product of the electric field strength and the area of the surface. A certain flat surface consists of 2 adjacent squares where the side length in meters of the larger square is 3 times the side length in meters of the smaller square. An electric field with 29 volts per meter passes uniformly through the surface, which is perpendicular. If the total electron flux of the field, okay. So they're telling us the force is proportional to the surface area. And these are squares. So it's basically like we have this small square and then there's a bigger square. This is x, this is 3x. So the area of one of them is x squared plus 9x squared. So the total area is 10x squared. Also 29 volts per meter. So it's going to be multiplied by that. Okay, what is the electron force through the larger square? So the whole thing, 29, we have 10x squared equals 4,640. So I'm going to just calculate this, right? I'm going to, x squared is going to be 464 divided by 29 because I canceled out the zeros. So then let me go from there. And I don't need to find x because what I'm really looking for, right, is flux is going to be the 9x squared times 29. So basically what we're looking for is 29x squared equals question mark, question mark, question mark. So it's going to be, let's see, x, okay, will be 464 divided by 29. So I'm doing 60, not, okay. And now I'm going to multiply that by, oh no, not 29x, sorry. It's going to be 9x squared. Also times 29. So it's going to be 9 times 29. So it's going to be times 9 times 29. As you can tell, the 29s would cancel, so there was no need to divide it. But I think it helps to sort of think it through. So that's going to be 4,176. This is a tricky one because they're adding in all this physics terminology, but you can ignore the physics terminology and just focus on the fact that it's directly proportional, and then you can draw it out and get the areas. All right, now we're on the last question. Let's see what they give for us. Scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables, x and y, for dataset E. A line of best fit is shown. Dataset F is created by multiplying the y coordinate for each data point from the dataset by 3.9, which of the following could be an equation for the line of best fit for dataset F. So right now, the slope is about, let's see. So we're multiplying by 3.9. All these values are going to go up by 3.9. So the y-intercept is going to go from around 12 to somewhere in the 40s. So it's not going to be C or D. And then the slope will triple because remember, slope is y over x, and the y is getting bigger, but the x isn't. So it's going to be a bigger slope. So it's going to be A, because the slope here is around 1.5, right? We're going over 4. We're going up maybe 6 or 7. So it will be A. And my friends, we are done with the test. If anyone has any questions, now is the time to speak them. Okay, I'll dismiss this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that is it. We are set now. And I hope you've all enjoyed the video. I'll be around. Daniel, do you have any questions? Anything going on? Okay. Otherwise, I'm glad you can all join me today. If you're taking the test in a couple days, good luck. I would study a lot tomorrow and take Friday mostly off. Try to get a good night's sleep. Try to chill. No, you're not, zebras. You are not. You'll do fine. You'll do fine. Believe me. No, you won't get disowned and you won't fail. You won't fail. Don't worry about it. You just did this video. You could watch the whole video again if you're just joining late. And if you are worried, you could watch other videos. Not just my videos. You could check out Tutorlini. Has anyone used Tutorlini? He's very good. I'll put his name here. And yeah, Blue Book tests, Khan Academy, free resources, right? Free resources. So again, I'm gonna head out, but it's been fun with you guys. I'll do more of these in the future. I'm glad I got some people listening in and watching, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye. You're welcome.